Hey everybody, Eric with MountModernLife.com, and it's official, spring has arrived, which means that we're going to be adding more greenery to the inside of our RV. Now, if you're familiar with living in a tiny space, you're probably well aware of the fact that there's not always a ton of surface area to be putting potted plants. Well, that's why today we're going to be creating a wall-mounted planter where we use one of these plants here to attach it to our piece of wood and then hang it vertically. Now, if you've ever come across the living wall art where the plants are hanging on the wall, but there's no soil or anywhere that they're actually potted, they're more just against a piece of wood with a little bit of moss, you may have asked yourself, how's that possible? Or at least I know that I did. And it's possible because they're air plants. But generally when I think of air plants, I think of these types. Well, air plants are actually called epiphytes, and there's over 22,000 different varieties out there. And what makes them different is they actually gain their moisture and nutrients via the air rather than from the soil. And so if you find them in nature, you'll generally see them growing on the side of a tree trunk or a branch or a rock. And one of the most popular ones is the staghorn fern, but there's also a variety of different cacti, orchids, and other ferns out there. And here we have a few options as well. We have our Hoya here. These two are both those. And then we have our heart fern, and then one of my favorite, the crocodilus. And then, to be honest with you, I can never remember the name of this one, but it's also an epiphyte. So while they gain their nutrients and moisture from the air, they're also very good purifying plants. But anyway, now that you have a better idea of what type of plant you can use for this specific wall-mounted planter, let's go ahead and dive into the materials you're going to need. You'll need an epiphyte plant. We're going with our crocodilus. Next, you'll need some wood. If you're looking to save on some weight, you can use cork bark or driftwood. We're going to be using cypress driftwood. Next, some sphagnum moss. We are using preserved sheet moss. Right now we have it in water, making it damp. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Then you're going to need a hammer with some nails, a pair of scissors, a pencil, some hanging hardware. Now the twine is optional depending on how you want to use the hanging hardware. Then a container of water, a circle object that you'll be able to trace onto the wood, and last but not least, some fishing line. Step number one is going ahead and attaching your hanging hardware. Now the main reason you want to do this is because once your plant's attached, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So here we have our hanging hardware, we have our twine, our piece of wood, and the material that I forgot to include in the materials list, a screwdriver, which you can use if your hanging hardware requires screwdriver, or if it's with nails, you can just use your hammer. But anyway, let's go ahead and get these attached. Now that we have those attached, we'll go ahead and attach our twine. Now for now, we're going to go ahead and leave this extra and leave it attached. That way, once we get to the wall, we can go ahead and see how high and how low we want this, and we can adjust it and then do the final trimming up at the end. But that's it for step number one. Step number two is to go ahead and use your circular object in order to trace your circle. Now, the size of your circular object is going to depend on how big your plant is, how much moss you're going to use, and how big your wood is. So this is what we're going to use. And then as far as the positioning on the board, you can kind of choose wherever, but the circle is kind of the template for where your roots and moss is going to go. So for us specifically, we're going to go a little bit lower on the board. Alrighty, and there is our circle. On to the next step. Step number three is to go ahead and add your nails. Now what we're going to use is we're going to use our circle here as an outline for where to place them. And you can kind of use whatever you think is necessary for your plant. I'm going to put 8 nails in here. I think that's definitely overkill. But yeah, that's what we're going with. So let's get these in. So True confession, as you just saw, when I was putting in my first nail, it actually created a slice in our entire piece of wood and it broke in half. Well, anyway, we went ahead and doctored the piece of wood back up, and that was because we wanted to continue on and show you guys what the nails are for. And what we're basically going to be doing is using our fishing line in order to secure the plant roots and the moss to the front of our piece of wood. However, if you're using a piece of driftwood or cork bark and you feel like it's just a little too fragile for the nails, once we get to the step where we're using the fishing line and the nails to secure it, we'll also show you a way to secure the plant roots and the moss without using the nails. That way you can completely avoid hammering into your wood if you're concerned with it breaking. But anyway, let's move on. Step number 4 is going to be attaching the fishing line to the top nail here. If you would like, you can save this until after the next steps. I just wanted to go ahead and get this attached so that once my plant roots and moss is in position, I don't have to worry about where that stuff is in order to get my fishing line attached. I'm going to go ahead and tie it off twice so it's good and tight. Perfect. I'll actually go ahead and grab my scissors here. Good to go. On to step number 5, which is to go ahead and remove your plant from the potted device that it's located in. And then once you've done that, this is what we're going to use the water for, and we're actually going to remove the dirt from the roots. Now, it's not important to get all the dirt removed, just quite a bit of it so it'll fit on your wood. Now that the majority of that's removed, we'll go ahead and set our plant on the wood. Step number 6 is going to be adding the moss to the roots of your plant. Now you can see here ours is soaking in water, and what you're going to want to do is squeeze it out so that it's damp. And then once you got it to a dampness that you like, you can go ahead and start spreading it around the roots of your plant. Step number 7 is to go ahead and add the fishing line. Now, as you can see here, our nails are actually still showing, but what we're going to do is do a couple rounds of the fishing line to get it somewhat secure, and then we'll come back through and cover up the nails with more moss and then re-secure all of that. So what I'll do is I'll start here with my fishing line at the top, and I'll take it down to the bottom nail. I'll loop it around, make sure that it's nice and tight, and then loop it back up to the top again in order to secure a V shape around the moss and the roots. Now that I've got my fishing line wrapped all the way around and back to the top, I'm going to grab my scissors, cut it off, and then tie it tight. Oh no. If you wanted to try to avoid this step of having to cover the nails up, you could try using a darker colored screw or nail. We didn't, so right now I'm going to go ahead and try to take some of this moss to squeeze it underneath the existing fishing line I have in place. And if necessary, I will come back through and add more fishing line in order to secure it. Alright, here we are, and for this version I'm actually going to use eye hooks instead of the hanging hardware. There those are, and now that we're going to be skipping the nails this time, we'll go ahead and actually skip the circle part as well. And then we'll move on to going ahead and getting our first line of fishing line attached to the board, which we'll wrap around and then secure with a couple knots. Now that the fishing line's all tied off, we'll go ahead and snip the end, and then we'll flip our board over and take our fishing line and wrap it around, leaving it generally loose on the top, and we'll go ahead and wrap it around probably a total of about 3 times. Now what we're doing here is we're leaving a little bit of looseness on the top so that we can go ahead and slide our plant roots and moss underneath the fishing line that's already secured to the board. And in order to do that, I will go ahead and reach over here and grab my plant and then my container of water. We'll remove it from the device that's holding it and clean the dirt off of the roots. Now that most of the dirt's been removed from our roots, we'll go ahead and bring it over here and slide our roots underneath the loose fishing line on top of our wood. Now that that's under there, we can go ahead and grab our moss, and then we'll want to squeeze the water out, and then we can take the moss and slide it underneath the loose fishing line on top of the roots of our plant. Have that in place, we'll pull our other end, trying to spread the line across the moss. So with this one, we want to add moss that goes all the way across the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more. You wouldn't necessarily have to do this. It's kind of up to you. And voila! Here's our wall-mounted planters, and we're absolutely thrilled with them. Over here we have the one that we use just the fishing line, no nails. It turned out pretty good. On the side you can see a little bit of the fishing line, which you could probably cover up with moss if you wanted. If you are going to take this approach though, I would suggest doing it with someone else, just to make it a little bit easier to tighten down the line. Now over here is the one we use the nails with. I like this approach better. It was just a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, and I like the finished product as well. Now one thing to keep in mind here is that if you are going to be using a cork bark or driftwood, sometimes it can be a little bit fragile, so you might want to be careful with the nails or take this other approach over here. Now, Katie and I don't lie about having green thumbs, because we don't. We like to learn as much as we can and try to improve on it. So if you're looking for any resources or other information, definitely check the description box. We'll have links to everywhere we look to learn everything that we could. And then also, if you're not in the mood to make your own, but you do like the way they look, we'll put a couple links that lead to people who make these and sell them, just in case you're looking for that. And then also, last thing, make sure to check back in the description box. Again, we are going to be putting a link to the post that we're going to write over on the website, so you can check that out. But anyway, we hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them below, or visit us over at the website. And don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Plant is actually called a
epiphyte.
Epiphyte. Here in front of us, we actually have a couple different varieties as well. We have our Hoyas. We have our Hoyas. I'm sorry, I've been messing that up all day. But anyway, these two are Hoyas. What is it? Hoya?
Hoy.
Hoy.
What sounds like hoy? Ahoy? Like
Ahoy, matey.
Ahoy. Hoya. Ahoy.
Hoya. Hoya. Why? I was doing fine. And one of my favorites, the crocodilus. And then over here we have our hua. What are they called?
Hoya.
Hoya. And here we have a couple versions. We have our huas.
Hoya.
Hoya, 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 Hoya.